We're good to go there. We got, we're recording. All right, I'm gonna go. Good morning, everybody. I'm gonna call the meeting to order. Tom informed me that he's not going to be able to be here this morning. But anyway, Becky, you call the roll.
Jim Sheeline.
Here.
Arlen McLean. Tom Kitson. Lara Mamini.
Here.
Doug Farster.
Here.
Rick Humphrey.
Here.
Tim Bivens.
Here. All right, everybody have a chance to take a look at the minutes, any additions or corrections? Hearing none, I entertain a motion to approve the minutes from last month. Moved by Bivens, seconded by Mimini. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All opposed, motion carried. And we're, without objection, we're going to change the agenda and we're going to go directly to Judge Ackert because she has a time certain court across the street. So Jackie, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thanks for accommodating me. I just have a bunch of criminal cases waiting for me right now across the street. Unfortunately, I have to be here today, and
Jackie, could get in. You really need to crowd into the mic. Oh no! You just shut yourself off.
What number is it, Jackie?
You just need to get right into the mic. Almost, you kind of have to eat them.
All right. Can you hear me now?
Yep. Thank you.
Okay.
Sorry.
I don't know how familiar you are with the contract positions we have across the street. We have 4 attorney contract positions that handle, well, one's a dedicated guardian ad litem position that we have to have for juvenile court. Mike Downey had it for decades. Now Attorney Darla Folker has that position. We have another contract position that Tom Murray holds that handles criminal misdemeanor cases. And then we have 2 contract positions that are conflict attorneys. And we went this route many years ago because to pay the attorneys hourly was cost prohibitive. It just cost us way much more money than if we just hired contract positions. So we have the 2 contract positions that handle all felonies and juvenile conflicts for us. Unfortunately, one of my conflict positions just gave me her letter of resignation. So she is done the end of this month, March 31st. Those 2, I'm going to refer to the 2 positions mainly right now. We have a contract for $36,000 a year. It's been that way for, I don't have the exact year, but probably at least 15 years it's been at that rate. I don't know how familiar you are with the attorney hourly billing these days, but their minimum billing is about $250 an hour. So to get someone to take on this position is difficult because most of them will tell you it's not lucrative. They understand they're doing a government service, but it's a big hit to their billable hours. So in conjunction with that, the number of attorneys we have in the area is just down. It's not just Lee County, Lee, Ogle, Whiteside, our whole circuit, which was Stevenson, Carroll, and Joe Davies. We're having a hard time just finding attorneys. So what I would like to propose that you approve is that we have the authority to contract up to $42,000 per position. So it would raise that $6,000 on the 2 contract positions that I have right now. I think I have found a solution because I have not been able to find anyone right now to take this position, and March 31st is quickly approaching. I think I have a solution on that position, which is to divide the juvenile and the felony, and I'll have 2 attorneys who would split the money. I'm not asking you for an additional full contract position, but I have 2 that would be willing to split the money, and if they were each getting $21,000, they're sold, they would do it. So that's why I'm here, is to have you consider giving me that authority. My other option will be, I'll tell you what happens if you don't, is that I'll have to start paying people hourly. And if you run the $125 an hour that we allow by order for the number of hours, it'll be over 100 grand a year that I'll be paying. So I'm trying to keep it down. Questions?
And
So-
Mr. Chairman, can I chime in on that too a little bit? Just to give him some context.
Sure, go ahead, Charlie.
We had a similar issue with my office when we were looking for attorneys. It was far and few between that we were able to find anybody. It was only by divine intervention that we were able to get the one that we have right now, which is Bridget Schott. The only reason that we got somebody nearly as qualified as her is because she wanted to get back to the area and was willing to take a hit in how much she was going to make. She was working for the Attorney General's office. I know just talking with Whiteside County Public Defender's Office and Whiteside County State's Attorney's Office, they're currently looking for people right now too. The public defender over there is offering about $65,000 per year. And she said she's not even looking for anybody with any type of expertise whatsoever. She just needs a warm body. We're just not finding people out there. When I was looking for an assistant state's attorney, there was at least a dozen other counties that were looking for assistant state's attorneys, and they just weren't getting anybody. Carroll County finally got somebody after having multiple job finding sites and postings everywhere for about a year. They were able to find somebody. So the problem that we're facing, and I know that Judge Ackert's already kind of hit on this, is that most of these attorneys' positions are heading out to the suburbs. They're heading out to Cook County. We just can't pull any of the attorneys back out here. And there's been a real drought with that.
And right now, Whiteside County has 3 positions open. Ogle County has 1. Stevenson County has 1. So we're also competing with them. And the Whiteside County position Charlie's referring to, they get benefits. These positions that I'm referring to, we don't provide them any benefits. It's just 36 grand a year. And so I'm not even proposing that we offer benefits to make it a sweeter deal. I think we need to increase the amount so that we can get attorneys to do the job.
So you just answered one of my first questions. Does the committee have any questions for Judge Ackert? Doug?
Just one, Judge. What did you say the total would be for the two, 21,000 each? Did I hear?
Yes, if I took that one, if you would approve up to the 42,000, I'm going to split that between 2
Okay.
people. So they would each get 21.
Okay, the reason why I asked, but just a minute ago, you said something about 36,000.
Right.
Okay.
Right now, if I split the position, they would each get 18. That
I
doesn't
see.
sound very
Okay.
appealing to them.
No.
So if I can present 21 to them, I think I have 2 on board.
Okay, thank you.
So just so I'm clear on the ask, you said there was 4 positions. Does that include splitting the one? Because that, or how does that work, Jackie? Because I'm looking.
Here's the reason I'm proposing that the 4 positions be approved up to 42. One of them's already at 42.
Okay.
So the guardian ad litem position is already at 42. 2 of them are at, well, 3. The other 3 are at 36 right now. So I'd like to propose that all of the positions be 42, and I can work with it because I'm running in, the other issue I'm afraid of is the other contract attorney who's handling both the juvenile and the felony for 36,000 a year. He's spending a lot of time and starting to grumble a little bit about it's losing a lot of money for him.
So
I
the
may-
ask is $18,000.
Or are you saying between the 3? Yes.
Yes.
If each position increased to 42,000, that's an increase of 6,000 per 3 positions. So a
Right.
total of 18,000.
Jim, that's just from here going forward. So it wouldn't be on this year's budget, wouldn't be a straight 18,000. Next year would be, but if you're not,
Correct.
so it wouldn't be a complete 18,000.
That's correct. And Paula, did everybody get this sheet? No. No, that was,
Oh, I think I emailed it. Yes, I emailed it the other day
okay.
to all of you.
Is that what was emailed?
And
That was in an
yeah,
email.
and that shows Judge Ackert's, this line item. So the budget is 148,125, what's been used so far to date is 47,000 on the one account, and the other account budget is 100,000. And 16, a little over 16,000 has been used out of that. So, we approved this, we're gonna have time, and Judge, you have no idea, you may come under budget. Typical history has been, have you been coming under budget?
It depends on the year. We try to
And
come
the
in
cases,
under budget,
sure.
but that
Yeah.
one contractual services line item includes, we have to pay for fitness evaluations when they're ordered. And so just one fitness evaluation. And Charlie, you can correct me. It used to be about 1,300. It seems like it's increased.
Correct, yeah.
So there are other things we pay out of that contractual service besides these attorneys' positions that you're referring to.
Right.
And so that I'm clear, the 42,000, as Rick mentioned, I would not be moving those other positions up until the next budget cycle. But the one position that I'm losing right now that I'm wanting the authority right now for that position to move to the 42,000.
Sure. Any further questions, Ms. Bivens?
No question, but just comment that normally, I'm not a fan of doing these things in the middle of a budget year. But when you said 36,000, I recall 15 years ago when I left, it was 36,000.
Correct.
So it hasn't changed. So I would certainly support this.
And I agree with you. I don't like to be here unless it's budget
Right.
time, but I wasn't in charge
Yeah,
of
This has been
her
neglected.
deciding to resign.
Yeah, it's been neglected for a while.
Right. Any other comments? Hearing none, I'd entertain a motion to give authority to Judge Ackert to increase her contractual conflict attorneys from 36 to 42,000 for 3 positions. Moved by Forrester, seconded by Bivens. Any further discussion? This would, yeah, so this would be a motion to bring it to the full board. Right, so just clarity, this would be a motion, bring it to the full board. So it's still require a full board approval. So any further discussion?
Is this so much a motion on the actual pay versus is an adjustment on the line item for the budget for judges?
I
So
think-
something you can think about, sorry to interrupt, but something that we traditionally do with most of the departments is if they come forward with something that comes up outside of the budget, you are asked to consider it and approve it, and the full board will certainly do the same thing. But when it comes to the budget adjustment, what we would typically do is wait till we get a little closer to the end of the year, see where the budget is at, and then bring a budget adjustment forward for you to consider and approve. Again, later in the budget year is what we're looking at. So at this point, I think you're just looking to give her the authority to be able to go ahead and change that position's salary.
They answer your question, Mr. Humphrey.
I mean, as long as she stays within her budget, there's really nothing even that's necessary, but okay,
That's correct, but we're gonna have to,
I understand.
Right.
But nonetheless, we appreciate Judge Ackert coming forward and sharing with us so we know why the budget might not be where she planned for it to be.
any further discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye. All opposed, motion carries. Thanks,
you.
Judge
Thank
Ackert.
you.
Appreciate it.
Thank you for letting me go first.
You bet. Okay, we're back to normal agenda. We'll do visitors. Mr. Nicholson, anything for the good of the cause? Nancy,
No, not at this time.
Paula,
Later.
later. Mr. Scrugstead.
Just an opportunity to say something later on the agenda, if
All right.
possible.
All right, very good. Mr. Copine.
Not a thing, sir.
All right, Paul Rudolphy. Amy Johnson, Dave Anderson. Greg, I just went brain dead.
I have that happen a lot. I don't know if it's been, I don't think it was on the agenda, but we are in a sort of a sticky situation right now. We received bids yesterday for the boiler replacement project at the new courthouse. And the low bidder was Leschers out of Sterling. They came in at $209,800. They are like close to $100,000 cheaper than what the projection budget was. We had 2 other bidders that were quite a bit higher than them. We would like to be able to award this. And I know it's probably going to have to go from here to special board if that's possible. We'd like to award it as soon as possible because of the time restraints we are on getting the equipment. We're 12 to 15 weeks before we can even get the new boilers, before they can even start. And we are down to 1 boiler that is just limping along right now. So that's my request right now, is to okay to put this out for bid award so that we can get a contract and get it to Charlie so he can review it and get the wheels turning on this project.
So point of clarity, it's not on your agenda, which Greg, my apologies. I think I'm the one that dropped the ball on that because we've only talked about it 100 times, but I see it's not on your agenda. There is a sense of urgency. We do have time to get it on the full board agenda, however, so the full board could take action on this next week, but this committee cannot take action other than to be informed. And if you have any comments or questions on it, you might take this opportunity to ask Greg. I was just pulling up the actual bids that we did look at yesterday. Properties Committee did not get a chance to hear this on the Tuesday meeting because of the sense of urgency. We put this bid out with the narrowest window of time to get it moved forward at this month's board meeting, because as you heard last month, the boilers over there are out. And so this is an emergency type of situation. And so bids came in yesterday. Tom Wilson as chair of property committee and Greg have reviewed them and they have a recommended bidder, and we would look to put that on the full board agenda for approval.
So I know there was discussion about possibility of this being used coming out of ARPA. But my understanding is the ARPA committee did not have a chance to talk about this as.
They did not, because once again, we didn't have the bids available at
So
that
would the
point.
proper procedure be that this committee would recommend moving this to executive?
We can't
You
vote on it,
can't,
but-
it's not on your agenda, so you can't take action.
But I guess what I wanted to talk about or ask a question is, I thought a month ago, 2 months ago, whatever it was, we talked about taking $250,000 up to $250,000 out of capital. And we voted on that for the boiler repair. Am I missing something here?
You have a better memory than I did, Rick, because I reported to Tom yesterday that I don't believe the approval for the money was made, and that this conversation.
It's on our.
How about we do this? How about I check real quick while you guys go on with the agenda items, and I'll just, Rick, do you remember what month that would be so I could look at the minutes real quick?
A month or two ago, we talked about taking it out of capital because it was not in his budget, and we voted on taking it out of capital.
I remember the vote to move forward with the bidding process. What I don't remember is the actual money being allocated. Traditionally, you guys would want to see the bids come back before you allocate the money. Doesn't mean you didn't do it, but that's kind of what you normally do.
Yeah, but I believe it was up to 250,000. So if it's under 250,000 and we voted on it, then it should go.
And it is under 250,000, so that would be good news. We wouldn't need any action by anybody. I'll look that up real quick, Jim, if you want to
Let's
carry
get
on.
clarity, because that was not when we were doing prep for the meeting, that wasn't what we talked about. We were still going to need approval from here. John.
2 questions. Was that approval a couple months ago, was that for the one across the street or was that the one up here?
Yeah, there was another one a couple months ago for this building, so there may be, I don't know.
My second one is, I assume properties committee did their due diligence, but there were 5 bidders, if I remember right. Right?
For the
Apple-
rooftop
bids
units,
were
yes,
apples
for
to
this
apples.
building, yes,
Bids are apples to apples for the one across the street.
right.
That's a very good bid. $100,000 less than.
Yeah, we made them bid to a scope of work, and then me and Tom sat down. We had them put down everything that they were gonna do. And we give them the scope of work to follow that as a guideline. And me and Tom sat down and looked at all 3 bids yesterday. And everybody, I had a couple of questions I needed to clarify with the low bidder, which was Leschers, and they responded right back. And so I do have an email saying that they are putting in what we spec'd out on the scope of work. So
I'm hoping that Rick's,
good shape.
I'm hoping Rick's memory is accurate and none of this will matter, but in any case, this committee cannot take action because I failed to get it on the agenda. So this conversation is mostly an FYI, and if we need to, we'll get it on full board agenda for next week. All right.
Bottom line is that came in a lot less than what we were afraid of. So,
Right.
That's really good. Even if I have to take a little more
Right,
extra
the
time.
projected budget, when I had it all put together for the ARPA committee, that it was I think it was a little over 300,000 for projection on it. And the one bidder came in at 386,000. So he was up in what the projection was, but this is fairly, considerable large amount of savings if we can proceed. So
the actual bid was $209,800. That's $209,800. Just to give you an idea of how far we are below that 250 or 300 projection.
Okay, very good. Anything else, Greg?
no, that's it.
All right, sir, I don't know your name.
This is Matt Folsom with the audio video, so I'll be introducing him in a minute.
Okay, very good. Yeah, our routine, Matt, is just to go around the room and ask, but no big deal. Okay, moving on to, we've got treasurer's monthly financial report and quarterly financial report. Paula.
Okay. So just a couple of things to highlight. The revenues. So I did update my list of revenues through March yesterday. And it looks like at this point in time, we're about 6% over budget in sales tax collection and about 10% over budget in income tax collection. So far, so good. I don't know if things are going to continue on that trajectory. The world's changing a little bit. And expenses in the general fund are overall on target. In solid waste, the collections for the first quarter were a little bit over budget. So that's a good thing too, only about 2%, not much, but still. And public safety was up about 10%. I do want to point out in your capital list, the list of financials, there's kind of a report of the capital. Rick, you and then Jim requested that I add more information on there. So there is a column for what is anticipated for projects coming up. And leaving you to know what's kind of left in the budget. So I just wanted to point out that I did make that change on that report for you. And we do have a little bit of a shift in, I guess that's all I really had to say about the financials, other than normally the financials that we give you are about a month and a half old when you see them. So since this meeting has been pushed back about a week with the kind of the new calendar, we had everything updated through February. So this is a more recent. So I think we're going to start giving you financials a month earlier than when you've gotten them in the past. So they're only going to be about 2 weeks or 3 weeks old at this point. So given that this is a quarter end, February is the end of the quarter. So I need you guys to approve the quarterly financials that you are just looking at, or hopefully are looking at, or have looked at, or will look at. I don't know, your call. So we need to do that. And then I don't know if you want to do that first, or if you want to get, while I have the floor, I was wondering if I could talk about the Demystifier that I handed out to you.
Okay, let's go ahead and get that done. So we need a motion to approve the quarterlies. Moved by Bivens, seconded by Humphrey. Discussion.
I got a question.
Question.
Paul. So when we did the budget for contingencies, I know we put potential raises in contingency fund. And was there two contingency line items?
No, I put it into one contingency line item. So the one contingency line item should say 250, 200.
Well, it says here in 50,000. That's why I was asking. In the capital fund.
Oh, in the capital fund.
That's why I was wondering, was there two contingency line items?
There's a contingency in the capital fund. There is a contingency in the general fund, and the salaries are in the general fund.
Thank you.
Okay, just for clarity, is we have minutes. This is the December minutes, right? And that was we were walked through the bids that were received for the replacement of the old courthouse. $299,900. So it's not hard to get confused with a lot of boilers, a lot of money, and relatively same amounts. Yeah. So anyway,
what's the status of that?
That was approved and we hope the work will be done here by the end of this month, end of March here. So the bid was approved formally through the board and the work began and is almost done.
Okay. Did I call for the vote? No, we were still in discussion. Rick asked the question. Okay, any further discussion on approving the quarterlies? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, motion carried. Paula, go ahead.
Okay, so I put together, and I'm sharing it with the board. I intend to push it out to the department heads if they're of any interest, but I handed out to all of you what I call the budget demystifier or the anatomy of a general ledger number. So the idea of this is to kind of explain how our financials work a little bit and how the account numbers that we use support how the financials work. So on page 2 is an overview of the accounting system and how our account numbers work, such as there's 3 segments to our accounts numbers. The first segment is the fund, the second segment is the department, and the third segment is the account number. Funds are set up by statutes and ordinances to have separate funds for things. The second segment, 3 digits, is the department, which of course is, the state's attorney's office, the treasurer's office, the county clerk's office. And then the third segment is the account number, which says maybe it's, a salary item, it's a supply item, it's a contractual item, that type of thing. So some of the significance that I think this might help you guys out with, especially on the finance committee, is if you go to page 3, that's where I start the list of funds that we have. So I've got on there the number, the name of the fund. And underneath of that, I have the spending authority that the statute gives it. So if we look at, for example, on page 3, Fund 002, which is the Animal Control Fund, their spending authority is the county board. You guys get to decide how that money is going to be spent. The revenues come from registration fees, rabies fees, things like that. The uses are for personnel, training, equipment, supplies. And then I also put the statutory reference that allows this fund to exist underneath of that. So I've set up all of those. And so there's a list of funds that goes through, because we have most of 60 funds here. And each one of those funds in your financial statements is set up really as a separate company. It's got its own separate trial balance. So cash, liabilities, fund balance, revenues, and expenses are all separated in the accounting system. Auditors really like that, by the way. So if you go to page, just to clarify a couple more things, page 14. So I did not list out all the individual grant funds that we have or the individual trust funds that we have. On page 14, it shows that all of our grants that we receive, of course, grants, some of them we have for many years at a time. Some of them are just for a year or so at a time. Anything that starts with a number 3 is going to be a grant. And I just didn't list what all of they were. I put X's there, but anyway, just so that you know. And of course, grants are completely governed by the grant agreement that we sign. So, and anything that starts with a 9 are trust funds. So we hold a number of funds. I don't know, there's about 10 or 12 of them, maybe not that many, maybe 10, that we hold in trust for somebody else. For example, the drainage districts, they're separate entities. The county treasurer sometimes can be their treasurer. So we have money that we hold for 6 different drainage districts. We hold money for, of course, now I'm drawing a blank. I was just working on this yesterday. Anyway, we have money for, townships. So we hold money for the townships for their MFT. We hold their money for their bridge program. So all of those they start with a 9 because they're not our money. We're just holding them for another entity. So that kind of, if you want to skim through there and look at all the different funds, that's what we have there to give you some out. So the next page on page 15 is just the list of the departments that are in there and the number that goes with it. So again, we have the county clerk, the circuit clerk, the treasurer, sheriff, so on and so forth. And then the last 2 pages gives a little bit of a summary of the last segment of our account number or our general ledger number, I should say. And that is the account portion of it, which indicates whether or not something is cash or an investment or whatever. So anything that's an asset, which would be for the most part cash for this county, starts with a 1. Anything that starts with a 2 is going to be a liability, such as accounts payable, or in this case, it starts with a 2 and then a 7. Debt payable, because we have debt on the LEC, is a 27. If it starts with a 27, it's a debt. The things that you're going to primarily see are revenues. Revenues start with a 4, and I have it split out here that anything that's a 4.1 is a property tax, a 4.2 is a sales tax. I'm on page 16 right now, by the way. So on and so forth down the way. And then on page 17, there's a little bit of a summary of the expenses that the county has. And anything starting with like a 5.1 are wages. 5.2 would be employee benefits, so on and so forth down the line. So anyway, I just kind of put this together to kind of give you something to refer back to. Maybe if you're wondering about, you know, a certain expense coming through and what fund it might be in. So it's just a little manual, I guess.
So I'm already finding this hugely helpful. And for the board's sake, or anybody that has your onboard login, we did save this in your resource folder. For those of you who haven't found your resource folder, you need to check it out because Becky and I are constantly adding documents to that folder. For example, your current budget that was approved is in that folder if you ever want to go look at it. So take a look at the stuff we're putting in that resource folder for your benefit to have available to you whenever you want it. So you can stick that copy of the Demystifier in your desk and have it available for a quick reference, or at any time through onboard, you can get to it and have a quick reference. Thank you for putting that together, Paul. I know it was a lot of work. I appreciate it.
Yeah, that is really good. Thank you.
Hopefully it's helpful.
Yeah. Well, I'm sure it will be. Okay, do you have anything else for us?
That's it. Thanks.
All right, thank you. One guy I missed is Mr. Simonton. Sorry, I didn't turn around to see who was on Zoom.
That's
Yeah,
okay. I'm still hobbling around, Jim. So I don't have anything on the agenda, but just a heads up for next month's meeting. I'll have some stuff put together on our fuel costs, which obviously have increased a lot since we had our budget meeting last August. So I'm projecting right now somewhere between $30,000 and $40,000 shortfall in that line item, but I'll have some better figures for you next month to discuss.
Okay, sounds good, John. Thank you. All right. Bob, you listening in? I see Lee County Chair. Do you have anything for us? Oh, I don't think he has. He doesn't have a mic. Sorry.
He's just listening.
He's just listening.
So he knows when to run across the hall.
That's right. Okay. Liram, do we have anything from Gredco?
No, not this time.
Okay, my understanding is insurance company did meet. Wendy, do you have a quick report on the insurance committee?
I do. So if you'll recall, we budgeted this year and hired an insurance consultant, an independent insurance consultant that can help walk us through our insurance program. And we expect that we will ultimately be going out to bids. So the current program that we're in right now is a pool. And while we have nothing against the program we're in, and in fact, the feedback we've gotten from our first meeting is that we're very competitive with regard to the benefits that we offer our employees in this pool environment. It is prudent and our fiduciary responsibility every 5 years to actually just take a look at it. So while we're not necessarily anticipating that we're going to make any changes in our current environment, we are going through the process just so the next 5 years, we have a high degree of confidence that we're doing the best we can with regard to the insurance benefit that we provide employees and of course the budgetary expense of the health insurance. The consultant met with the insurance company earlier this week. It was our first meeting with the consultant. We've already done quite a bit of data gathering and presented that to employees regarding how the employee benefit stacks up against others locally here, other counties, municipalities, and even KSB as an example, just to give an idea of how we stack up. We are going to be meeting again in May. The insurance consultant will be again gathering more information that we'll start analyzing. And then we're going to, at that meeting, we'll be delving a little bit more into the aggregate data of our health insurance right now in terms of our risk. You know, do we have a high level of high cost employees with some sort of an illness, or are we kind of middle of the road, or are we low? So bottom line is that's what we'll be looking at the next time we meet in May, and we'll report back, Jim, obviously periodically throughout this process.
Very good. Any questions for Wendy? All right, hearing none, we'll move on to old business. And we are at A, approval of the Teamsters Local 722 collective bargaining agreement. Have the contract there in front of you and on board. And our purpose here is to approve this or move it on to executive, be moved on to full board for approval. Any comments, Mr. Humphrey, you'd like to make?
Is there a reason why this is the unsigned version? Anybody know?
I think that's just the copy I got, Rick, and I'm the one that attached it into onboard. So we do have a signed version if you want to verify that, or I can get that for you for verification. Yeah, it just happened to be the version that I got sent.
Okay. Hearing no questions, I'd entertain a motion to move this on to executive. Moved by Bivens, seconded by Barster. Although any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, motion carried. All right, item B. And that is the AV technology bid approval for this room.
And I can take it from there if you want.
Go ahead, Wendy.
All right. So as we've been talking about for the last several months, we did go out to bid. The selection committee now has a recommended bidder. We are looking to move forward from this committee and the full board approval of that bid. But Jim thought it would be useful and helpful if we actually had our recommended bidding firm come today and give us a brief overview of what the vision is. You may or may not recall that the RFP was put out to design and actually then install the equipment that's designed. And so we thought maybe Mr. Matt Folsom could give a little overview of what it is he envisions for the room.
Good morning. Thank you, Wendy, for having me. And my name is Matt Folsom. I'm with Tri-City Electric. We're based a little ways west of here over at Quad Cities. We also have an office in Des Moines. So Tri-City Electric is a electrical contractor. We're actually the largest electrical contractor in the Midwest. Been around it's a family-owned business, been around for 128 years. We've got over 1,200 employees, annual sales over 270 million. You know, we have multiple divisions, within that being a low voltage division and an audio visual division, which is what I'm here representing. So that's just kind of a quick overview of Tri-City. Within our low voltage division, we have kind of a hand-picked team of engineers and technicians and programmers with about 80 plus combined years of experience in the AV technology industry. And you know, we work really well together on collaborating and problem solving and coming up with designs and solutions to problems and obstacles that we run into. So we're, you know, we I guess take a lot of pride in that. So, you know, we've got, of course, the financial backing of Tri-City as well. So we can, you know, we can get bonding and that sort of thing. It's not a problem for us. So just a little bit about Tri-City. But yeah, I'll just briefly kind of go over what we're proposing as far as the solution, and then I'll kind of open it up for questions. So we, you know, as we understand kind of the RFP, obviously you guys use Zoom for, you know, bringing in remote participants, trying to get away from using the paper agendas and that sort of thing, doing, you know, more electronic. And then also the audio in here, I think kind of leaves a lot to be desired. So those are kind of the,
Just as a reminder, speak into the mic, Matt.
Because our audio isn't very good.
Speaking of which, so those are kind of the needs as we understood them. And so what we proposed, and we considered a few things, but what we proposed is actually to do 3 large monitors up here on this wall. We went with monitors as opposed to doing screens and projectors for a couple of reasons. I would say that looking at the technology by itself, doing the monitors is probably more expensive than doing screens and projectors. But when you factor in some of the installation challenges that we would have, and just, you know, having to deal with things like lighting, we figured that it was a better value overall to do the monitors. The projectors and screens would be very susceptible to ambient lighting, washing out the image, kind of like, you know, what we're seeing here. So all in all, we decided that the monitors, even though a little bit more cost of equipment, I guess, would just make more sense and just give better value overall, better picture quality. But the idea behind the 3 is you could simultaneously have a Zoom far end, kind of like we're seeing here. Plus you could have the agenda up, and then you could have another piece of content on the other screen, such as a presentation or the you know, something out of onboard, something like that. So we would have a couple of different inputs to the system. From up here, you'd be able to plug in a bring your own device, laptop type thing, or we also included a wireless solution so that somebody could present wirelessly from anywhere in the room, either via Wi-Fi or if it was an outside vendor or something that you didn't want on your internal Wi-Fi, there'd be a little dongle that could plug into their device that would allow them to present wirelessly. So try to include a lot of flexibility for presenting content in that, and you know, flexibility as far as what source you can put on which monitor and that sort of thing. The other requirement that was kind of brought to our attention is to have a simplistic user interface. So we would do a customized touch panel interface that will allow you to manage the entire AV system, audio and video. And the nice thing about that is we can kind of make that as simple or advanced as it needs to be, depending on the user, depending on the scenario. So it could be as simple as you come in, you press one button, turn everything on to a typical scenario, or you can go to an advanced page and, like I mentioned, route different sources to different monitors, you know, control microphone levels independently, those sort of things. So kind of giving you simplicity where we can, but giving you the back end controls where they're necessary. And one of the things that that we called out in the scope is that we would actually have a meeting ahead of time to sort of talk about those things with our programmer, so that we can realize that, and hopefully it's useful right out of the gate.
So Matt, if I can interrupt just a thought, a second here. So the selection committee did say that, you know, the solution that was provided sounded really simple, but they recommended that we go look at it. So Paula, Nancy, Becky and myself did go over to Rochelle where Matt has installed systems over there, and we got an opportunity to see that touchscreen and understand exactly how simplistic and or like you said, you can go into more advanced modes as well. So we really appreciate seeing that.
Yeah, the idea being that somebody can very quickly and easily come in, start a meeting, join a Zoom call, all those things and get started quickly. But also kind of given a unified interface to really manage the whole system. And then I'll talk about the audio briefly as well. So one of the specific complaints is the delay that you probably notice when you speak into a mic and you kind of hear yourself a little bit later. And that's largely just due to the distance between the speaker and where you're sitting. The sound just kind of takes time to travel through the air. So what we're proposing is actually to do ceiling speakers. And then also we've got new Microplex wireless mics. It's actually called out in the RFP, the Shure Microplex product, which we use quite a bit. It's a great product, industry standard for this type of thing. And these would be completely wireless, so you wouldn't even have to have these wireless. They would all just sit in a charging dock when they're not being used, pull them out, set them on the desk, and be ready to go pretty much. So a lot less having to, or a lot less time, I guess, having to set things up and put them away and that sort of thing. But the idea with the ceiling speakers is that sort of minimizes that path between the speaker and the listener so that we can try to not eliminate, but at least minimize that perceived delay and just get better overall coverage and clarity throughout the room. So, and on the Zoom calls and the recordings and those sort of things as well. So we think that what we proposed is going to be a very significant improvement to what we've got here today. I think that's kind of all I've got. So I'll just sort of open it up for questions if anybody's got anything.
Matt, once again, I'll add something. So the idea right now, the original bid includes one camera that would be mounted above the center monitor that's up here on the wall. He does have an alternate bid in there if you wanted to have one or two additional cameras that would then face this direction. With this room layout, which we're testing, right now, the chair of the committee or the chairman of the board and the clerk and whoever might be, Charlie, for example, they're not anywhere on those cameras. So the question becomes, do you want that additional camera? And that's an alternate bid if you wanted to consider that. So the bid is, before I turn it over to questions of the committee, the original bid is in the amount of $199,116. Alternate bid 1 is $2,945. This is, by the way, all in your onboard packet. Alternate bid number 2 is $12,623, and alternate bid number 3 is $7,739. If you added all those up, it would be $222,423. And I don't remember I didn't write down the 3 alternate bids. One of them was for the camera. What were the other 2 for? Help me out.
I can walk through that real quick.
That'd be great.
Yeah, thanks for bringing that up. So alternate 1 would be for an assisted listening system. And I did that as an alternate because it wasn't specifically called out in the RFP. But that is an ADA recommended, if not required, depending on the jurisdiction. But in any kind of a public space or public venue where there's either performance or just meetings or anything, you're supposed to have some sort of hearing assistance system for hearing impaired. So this would be for a very simple system that would just consist of an FM transmitter, and then you'd have body packs with earbuds or a neck loop that would work with telecoil type hearing aids. And you'd have a number of those packs available for attendees that needed them. So that is what that alternate 1 is for. And then alternate 2. So with the base bid, we included 1 camera. And I apologize, I should have talked about that some more. So thank you for bringing that up, Wendy. But base bid would just include the one camera kind of in the front of the room, similar to what you got now. The alternate two adds 2 additional cameras in the back of the room. So you've got the flexibility of being able to see people's faces from any angle in the room, basically. You've got a different setup than what you got today. But then that also will have the capability to sort of switch cameras and automate and the framing up of the shots that the camera's capturing based on who's speaking in the room. So in other words, if you're on a Zoom call and you've sort of got, say you had the room set up with the 3 or 4 wings, I guess, kind of the way it was a few weeks ago, we could sort of build in a pre-configuration where, you know, somebody's sitting over here and they're facing this way and they start speaking, then that camera is going to kind of frame up a wide shot to pick up that individual that's talking automatically without user intervention. So, so it's the additional cameras plus the additional programming and capability to do that is what's included in that alternate two. And that would apply to the Zoom call and the recording and streaming feed, which actually segues right into alternate 3. That was another thing that wasn't specifically called out in the RFP, but that would just provide a dedicated encoder box that would sit on the network to stream out to YouTube or Facebook Live or some sort of platform like that, where it's not a 2-way call like a Zoom call would be, but that's more of a 1-way, just, you know, multicasting out where you can have you know, your citizens basically log into that third-party platform and see what's going on in real time. So, and then we also did include in the base bid an audio-only recorder for just archival purposes, and that doesn't record video; it just records the audio. And that would be controlled and managed by the touch panel.
Well, what kind of capacity is it?
It's based, so it's got 2 SD card slots in it. So it depends on the capacity of the SD card slot you put in it, basically. But it's got 2, and the way we usually set them up is you can put 2 cards in there. When it fills up one, it'll automatically roll over and start recording onto the other. And then you can pull those out, put them in a computer, archive them. I can't think of a case where I've actually done this, but that unit also does have a network connection where I think you can actually have it archived to a file share automatically on your network. So that's something we can look at setting up too, if that's, you know, that would be more desirable. So it just kind of depends on, I guess, how you want to go about.
It would only be saving audio, you wouldn't be saving the video.
Correct. Yeah, so the alternate 3 device does actually add the capability to record video locally as well as stream it out to YouTube or Facebook or whatever. So you can set that up where it will, it could do a local archive of video. Typically, if you've got a YouTube account, though, you've got all your stuff archived there as well. So again, just kind of depending on that does add that capability.
And right now, the video is being archived through YouTube, so that's what we're doing right now. But the audio is necessary, and the recording device is necessary when you guys go into, in particular, when you guys go into executive session. Those audio tapes have to be saved. Right now, it's just audio. It's not required to save any sort of video. And we don't, of course, save video of any executive sessions because they're not going out to YouTube. So.
Any technical questions for Matt? Rick?
Yes, just when he was talking about executive session with this, excuse me for my ignorance on the technology, but the encoder, what you talked about in the third option, I mean, I guess my concern is we go into executive session, is that going to be something that's easily turned off, or how are you gonna, make sure that happens, so we're not,
Yep, so that's an excellent question. So that would just be managed on the touch panel. And, there's a couple ways we could do it. I mean, I would have a button or a control on that touch panel that would start and stop that stream at any given time. So if you're in executive session, you could just not start the stream and it won't stream. If you want something a little more secure than that, we could set up an executive session mode within that touch panel that you go into, and it just completely locks that device out altogether and only allows the audio recording to take place. So again, totally customizable. We can kind of talk through how we want that to work, but that's basically how it would just be managed on that touch panel one way or the other.
Any other, Tim?
Experience with your company working in historic buildings?
So we have done work in historic buildings as Tri-City. And in fact, actually, when I was here doing the original kind of site walk, getting familiar, I looked around quite a bit and tried to envision pathways and that sort of thing and what kind of challenges we have. That's actually another reason we decided to go with the video monitors is we just felt like that install would be a lot cleaner. There's a above ceiling space right back there. We can drill right through this wall and get our wiring right through there without, disturbing the aesthetic. So that is something that we took.
Tables would be going that way, not.
Correct. Yeah. Yeah. Everything would go back to a rack in that closet back there. That would kind of be our head end. So
That's another thing the selection committee liked about this proposal is that it was, very much in maintaining this room, the historical nature of this room.
and a couple other things I'll mention too. So being an electrical company, I'm able to include the necessary power drops that'll be required for those in this scope. So you don't have to go out and get another contractor to do that. That's included here. The other thing I included is some after hours labor. So when we actually go to drill through that wall, we do that after hours so that we're not making a bunch of noise while there's people working in here. So we've taken some things like that into consideration.
Go ahead.
Some other quick one. What's the installation, the time frame, do you believe, sir?
Another excellent question. So as I'm sure you all are aware, there's been a lot of issues with supply chain and being able to get things, particularly chips and electronics and those sort of things. So we are seeing some very extensive lead times on AV equipment and technology to the tune of 8 months, 10 months, 12 months in some cases. What we have been trying to do is, if we get awarded a job, we'll order everything immediately, just so that we can get it as quickly as possible. If there's anything that's not readily available, we'll have estimated lead times at that point. In some cases, there may be other options we can consider for certain parts if they're not going to be available for a long time. So we've had to do some of that. So just being upfront about that, I mean, it could be very likely, into the fall of this year before we could have everything in place. The other thing, the other possibility is, where we have enough in place, we can sort of provide a subset of functionality. So it's okay, let's do that. And then when these other parts and pieces come in, we'll come back and finish the job. So we've had some situations like that as well. As far as, from commencement to completion, I would say probably 2 to 3 weeks. The room, we probably need to set aside a week at least for the room to be
Dismantled, so to speak.
and unavailable while we're installing the speakers in the ceiling and doing the wiring and hanging the monitors and that sort of thing. And then we'd probably have another good chunk of time just finishing the commissioning process and getting everything dialed in there. So I guess if that kind of gives you an idea, but
Matt's done a really good job of managing my expectations because, as you all know, I wanted this like yesterday. But unfortunately, or fortunately, every other vendor told us the same thing in their bid. The supply chain issues are out of their control. And so unfortunately, it may be as long as Matt says before we can actually implement or fully implement.
yeah, I would hope that it would be much sooner than that, but the reality of what we're, the world we live in right now, that's just where we're at. So, but we're, like I said, we're a very collaborative team. We look for workarounds. We look for ways to try to get you what you need. If at all possible, even if we have to temporary something, we're doing a lot of that these days. So we'll work with you. We'll do the best we can and have a positive outcome at the end of the day. So.
Any other technical questions for Matt? Mr. Copine?
Wendy, as we've talked about coverage for the courtroom. We have had need to use what we refer to as the overflow rooms. What's the expandability capabilities from this room to the other two rooms here? And are we going to sustain an additional amount of?
So the feedback that I received from a lot of you board members was that if we're going to make this kind of investment in this room, this is where we probably need to continue to have committee meetings and full board meeting. However, you're right, Mike. There have been times when in the committee room we've needed to use that. So we actually have some other ideas in mind. They may be ideas that we do chat with Matt about, but right now that's not, he wasn't asked to consider that room in this bid. But we think for the limited times when we want to do that, and it needs to be go out to Zoom or YouTube, that we do have some pieces of equipment we can take advantage of. For example, you've all seen the television that's on the wheels now on the little cart that goes back and forth. So that cart has the ability to add a camera to it and can be used in that room over there. So we've kind of got some ideas in mind and we may consult with Matt on it, but right now the two things are not connected.
Couple things I will add to that. So that cart that you mentioned, we actually did include a wireless HDMI transmitter receiver pair. The idea being that the receiver in could go on that cart, and that cart could be used even just to roll out here where somebody sitting back there could be able to see easier. That could be, mirroring one of the displays up here. I don't know exactly what kind of wireless coverage that particular device is going to provide, but it's possible that could even be rolled into another room and used that way as well. The other thing I will say is when we design kind of the back end of the system, we always are, thinking about what may or may not be expanded in the future. So a lot of the technologies that we use nowadays are very easily expandable if you need more inputs or more outputs, or if you need an overflow zone or those sort of things. We're probably adding equipment in those instances. Like if we need to come back and add on something to add functionality in there. But what we want to avoid is having to replace equipment that's been recently deployed. So I guess that kind of helps answer your question.
It does. Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, so thank you, Matt, but please hang around. Appreciate you coming and making your presentation and so as the committee has discussion, we move forward with the whatever the committee decides to do. If you'd still hang around in case there was further questions, especially if we get into the alternate bids issues. So what I was thinking is that, yeah, thank you, appreciate it. What I was thinking is I'd entertain motion for the full bid of the $222,423, and then discussion we can talk about the alternative bids within that. So if that's acceptable, I'd entertain that motion moved by Bivens, seconded by Humphrey. Discussion. Okay, no discussion. I'm surprised of you guys. All the questions must have been answered. Okay, all those in favor of the motion for the total bid of $222,423 and move this on into executive for full board consideration signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion carried. Thank you. Appreciate it, Matt. Thanks for all your help and we look forward to working with you. Okay, we'll move on to item C. And that's the non-union wage increases resolutions.
Just a point of clarity, all we're doing is just ratifying what you already did at the meeting last month. This is just creating a source document for the payroll department to have available.
Okay, entertain a motion to send these resolutions on to executive, moved by Bivens, seconded by Forrester. Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Motion, those opposed, motion carried. All right. Okay. So D, E, and F, we do have a recommendation from, let me pull that up. And this is under your resources tab, administrative services. The meeting on the 3/17 meeting and I can scroll down to this. This mouse on this thing leaves me a little bit to be, there it is. Okay. All right, their recommendation was as follows. And that would be $8,400 per year stipend for a county board chairperson, $1,200 per year stipend for county board vice chairman, and an increase of the per diem per meeting for board members from $60 to $80. And that was unanimously recommended to the finance committee. Paula, do we have what is that? What would that extra? I didn't do the math as far as what that would cost on a yearly basis, additional going forward. Do we have any idea on that?
I actually haven't done the math. No. I'm sorry, Jim, I haven't either. I'm sorry.
Well, then I don't feel bad. I can't feel bad that I didn't do the math, but.
And to be clear, this recommendation would not take place until the December 5th first meeting after the election, because you cannot, a sitting board cannot change their own per diem. So, so there's time to do the math, I guess, is what I was thinking, Jim.
Yeah, so we don't necessarily have to take this this month. This is just a recommendation from the Admin Services Committee. We could dispose of this. It is on our agenda. We can dispose of this. The others on E, well, let's see, it'd be D and F. Because they did not roll this in. My understanding, this just covered us. This didn't include the planning commission and the.
Yes, they didn't specifically speak. However, I do believe all of the discussion that all the committees have been having is that what they did for one, they would do for the other. So maybe they didn't specify simply because it was their intention to do everybody.
So for our purposes today, and since we do have a recommendation, we can talk about this right now. I'm actually not prepared to have a discussion as far as compensation for our elected officials yet. But whatever you guys want to do, we can talk about this today and not take any action. We can accept the recommendation from the committee and move it on, or we can table it until we're ready to talk about it at a later date. It's whatever you guys want to do. Mr. Humphrey.
So for the elected officials aspect, when does that have to be done by? Because it has to be so many days before the next.
It's 180 days. And so you have essentially till the first couple days in June. So you do have some time.
So with that being said, I mean, we think we got a lot of time, but it'll, fast approaches. I mean, are we gathering information to see what other counties are, to see where we fall? Are we just gonna pick a number out of a hat or throw something at a dartboard, or what's our method for determining what we're gonna set the elected official salary at?
So as far as historical information is we do have the salary survey from USCCI that we can base on, and what I was kind of thinking is that we, Wendy, Bob, and I would kind of put our heads together to bring a recommendation, a idea to the committee that we can work from. It's always hard when you don't have something. It's just like, and I want to say something that in regards to sheriff's salary, Mr. Scrogstead and I had a lengthy discussion the other day, and I asked Jack, put something together, an idea. I mean, you're familiar with that office and whatnot, and Jack was put together something on a spreadsheet that is something I think we should look at. So yeah.
And that's fine. Like I said, I just, I know how time keeps marching on, and I just didn't want to make sure that we're sitting there at the June meeting with no information, and I don't want to say backed in the corner, but having to make a decision without any information.
Right.
So that was the one thing that my second, I guess, topic is on the board chair and the vice chair. Well, I know that they both put in a lot of time currently. I mean, we don't know what who's going to be in that position going forward. And so my comment is not necessarily on personalities, but the position themselves. And I think they're all eligible for per diem, just like we are as attending committees and stuff. But I have a difficult time raising compensation for those positions when we've added Wendy's position. And it was my understanding that the administrator would be kind of taking the reins and running the county, so that not as much time would be needed up here for those two particular individuals. So I guess I don't know that I can fully support an increase in that. That's just me personally, because I think we've added financial burden on our budget by adding an administrator, which that was supposed to take some of the workload off of these two positions. So that's just my 2 cents.
Okay. So I guess I asked question, what does the committee, we can talk about whatever we want here, but do you want to kind of tackle this all in one discussion? You want to talk about the recommendation, and we're kind of able to do our own thing here. So, Mr. Nicholson.
I'm neutral on the position of increases or not increases. I agree with Rick.
Yep, John in the bike.
I agree with Rick in a lot of ways. I think you'll see an example set by Ogle County in the fact that they had a raise in their vice chair and chair salary, but it was contingent on the fact that if they hire an administrator, that would drop significantly. So they have the same philosophy that Rick had, that the administrator takes a lot of the weight off the back, chair and the vice chair. So might want to review that before you make too many decisions. I don't want to go by somebody in the county, but there was some thought went into that philosophy too. So
I think
And there
that,
are a lot of
I
hours
think
put
that
in.
was, this is nothing against Wendy. I'm sure Bob doesn't want to speak to this, but I know the time that Bob is here and eventually, that could be true, but as Wendy continues to get her arms wrapped around that position, we have two people that are here an awful lot, so.
And I will say that when I was chair, I put in 3 days a week, 3 hours a day. And not all of it was work. I mean, some of it was chatting with Becky and she'd get me coffee. But you put that time in, and that was my decision to do that. But you still put the time in sometime, whether it's scheduled time or non-scheduled time. Bob is here an awful lot. So like I say, I'm neutral on the position. I can honestly say they probably deserve a raise. I don't know if it's needed.
Any further discussion? Boy, you guys are chatty this morning.
I would just, I don't have a problem with the raises. I know it's been decades since they've been, has been raised. And usually in elected positions, you usually, if you're doing the job, you're losing money. You usually don't make money in these positions. But I think it's been, if I remember right, probably 30 years since there's been an increase. And I think it went up briefly and then the county had some financial difficulty and then they lowered it again. But I do think, I would say this, if maybe we should table this until we know exact numbers. I think that would be prudent that we know what we're talking about as far as dollars before we actually voted on something we don't know what we're spending.
Thank you, Mr. Bivens. That's my thought exactly as well. I'd like to have the numbers and I'd like to be able to do this as a package. So it's one resolution that will cover us if we can do that. We can pull that together. So you make that motion to table this conversation to next month. Okay, motion by
Mr. Chairman, as long as that includes that to get the numbers that we're talking about, that we have numbers for.
Yes. Yes, and we'll have that for you, I'm sure. Paul is smiling at me. All right, motion to table discussion on county compensation and elected officials to April meeting. Moved by Bivens, seconded by Forrester. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, motion carried. No, those are, we pulled all those together. Yeah, so D, E, and F is all still laying on the table. Okay. Nope, you're all good.
Sure, they're all.
Okay, we are to G, computer upgrades. And I was informed that was tabled in public safety. And so we have no action to take on G. So that takes care of old business. We'll move on to new business, ARPA committee recommendations. And we are at number 1. Paul, do you want to make any comments in regards to this? I think we all know we've talked about this for a couple, at least a month, a little more. If you want.
Yeah, in terms of
Standard deduction.
Yeah, the standard. Yeah, I think we've kind of talked ad nauseum on this, or I hope we have, such that everybody understands it. But there was actually an article in the paper today in regards to the city of Dixon and their 2.2 million, and they've realized with the new rules, they're also taking it as a one-time standard deduction, realizing that the reporting requirements and the restrictions that ARPA put on the money when it first came out are basically lifted if you do this. So there's quite a bit of benefit in taking it as a one-time benefit.
So further comment I want to make. I know there's been stated some concern that these dollars not get lost in the county general fund. And do you want to make a comment on that, Paul or Paula, in regards to the
Well,
tracking of these
yeah, I
dollars
mean-
once we take the standard deduction?
Well, correct. And the demystifier, if you will, that Paula kind of went through today, actually kind of helps you with that. Because we treat this as a grant. So in a fund, it's actually fund number 308. So all of that is trackable within our system. We do have a good accounting system. We have that money separated in a different bank. So we track it to the penny. But basically, we had to do that anyway because you're using federal money. So you need to make sure that you can report every dollar spent. So yeah, even if we went to the standard deduction, we can use it in county general services, but we would still keep it in a grant fund in order to track it, make sure that we know every dollar, what we're using it on, where it's going. So there should not be any money missed, where we're not sure if that was county general or the ARPA money. Definitely we'll be able to keep it separate.
Okay, so the recommendation from ARPA is to take the remaining money that has not previously been allocated as a standard deduction and put into a separate
And
fund.
actually, it's all that. It's the
Oh,
whole.
it is all that you could,
It's, we have got clarification. We can basically say the 6.6 we can take, even though we've allocated it or used some of it. We just, since our reporting isn't due until April 30th, we can report it as such that we took the 6.6 million.
okay, so that would be the recommendation from ARPA is to do that. And so then our purpose here would be to take that recommendation and pass that along to the full, to executive for full county board approval. Right.
Motion that I made coming out of ARPA was that we did this, we put it as a standard deduction with the remaining funds to focus on the 5 points that we voted on as a board, to concentrate on them first and foremost. So yes, that was the recommendation.
All right, so I'd entertain that motion. Moved by Bivens, seconded by Humphrey. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carried. Yes. All right. All right, the next thing would be out of ARPA is the community service applications. Now,
We tabled all those.
So-
At ARPA.
and I understand that. So Wendy, do you want to?
So the ARPA committee did table these. Just a little background for everybody that's in the room. We did develop this community service agency program grant and put the applications out and so forth. And we're to the point in the program of awarding the grants, which were supposed to be given out on or before April 1st. And the ARPA committee had a lot of discussion and ultimately ended up tabling that. Since that conversation, we've had some additional information and feedback from State's Attorney Boonstra. Can I turn it over to you for that discussion? Yes.
Sure, yeah. I'm going to apologize. I wasn't there for the ARPA meeting. I just got the highlights for everybody else. My understanding is that there was 5 organizations that had applied for the social services in the amount of $250,000, which was set aside by the committee and or county board for social services. There was an application process that was put in place for anybody that was requesting those funds. Those 5 entities then complied with that application process, brought it before the ARPA committee, and there was some confusion, I think, on what was required for that application process. It's my understanding, and as I looked at everything, the process was followed by those 5 entities. Right now, I think the amount that was requested was approximately $50,000, obviously well within that 250,000. And I think it would behoove the county to take a look at that and look for the approval process of those applications and not trying to move the quote unquote goal line for those entities that were trying to follow the application procedures. So I think I maybe explained that fairly well at that point, but if there's something I'm missing.
So you heard Charlie's, so, you know, we have a little bit of dichotomy here. You guys, I'm part of the ARPA committee. We tabled it, coming from, but yet we have a recommendation from our attorney that says, hey, you have a deadline, you had programs that had applied, and to hold this off is putting past the deadline.
Well, if I'm not mistaken, the deadline runs till March 30th, 2023.
Sure. I think that was the mistake there, is that it wasn't a deadline I'm talking about. It's the goal line what I'm talking about, in terms of they met the process that you guys have put in place, the application process. And then you're asking above and beyond what they've already been told that they had to provide.
And in the
So what
application
is-
and overall grant process, we said the grants would be awarded on or about April 1st. Yes, they had some time to spend that money, but we said we would award it by that date. So the concern here is, at least for these 5, and there was a lot of good discussion about how we might, change applications going forward and take into account some of the discussion items that you all talked about at ARPA. But the concern here is for these 5 who applied in good faith, following the rules that we laid out and you all approved, should we just go ahead and award them and follow the rules that we laid out? And then worry about changing the goal line for other future applications.
Mr. Norberg.
Thank you, Mr. Sheeline. I'm on the ARPA committee as well, and I know we just approved to take this as a deduction. I still think it should go through the ARPA committee. I heard what Charlie said. I may not like what Charlie said, but I heard what Charlie said. But I think from the reporting standpoint, to make this simpler on the group, I think we should get through that. And then if we decide we want to award to these 5 entities, do it that way, just to simplify the reporting. I see Paula shaking her head, so that's just my suggestion based off the previous conversation.
Okay, Mr. Humphrey.
I think that was part of the discussion that we had at ARPA, is that's the concern, because the goalposts keep continuing to move without really having specific guidelines in place. As we get further into this, more questions come up, more questions on eligibility and how we're going to determine this, and that. And I want to be as fair as everybody. And I know these are good entities that do good for the community. I just don't know that I feel that I'm backed into a corner by a deadline that is an artificial deadline, I guess, that we're self-imposing. So I'm not in support of passing these through without going through the ARPA committee.
Can I follow up real quick?
Go ahead, Charlie.
Thanks, sir. Again, I think there was some confusion what I'm saying. What I'm saying is not necessarily the changing of the goalposts with federal government. We're talking about the process that the county put into place, the process that the county said, if you do this, we'll consider you. And we're not asking for anything above this. So what I'm talking about is this county saying, follow this procedure, but now we're not going to hold up our end and actually follow through with what we're doing. That's all I'm saying.
So specific to these 5 applications in the community service organization, and not the broad, do we want to rethink how we approach ARPA federal dollars in general, I think is where Charlie's going. Just these 5 we're talking about. Are we changing the rules midstream when they've done everything we've asked them to do?
Mr. Bivens.
What would be our liability or repercussions if we don't approve these? I mean, if we add more requirements.
Sure. I'm going to try to walk a fine line because I want to give you the legal advice that the county board needs to have, but I want to make sure because it is an open session that I'm not going too far with that. There's certainly, I guess, a recourse for specific performance, but I don't want to dive too far down that path in this setting.
Well, I guess my question would be at ARPA, we also received two business requests, one I think for 50,000 and one for 80,000. So does that throw them in line here just to automatically approve them? I mean,
I don't think so, because you haven't really approved a small business program yet. That's, you guys started throwing out some ideas to us to develop and bring back to you at the next meeting, that draft small business program. And in fact, ARPA staff met yesterday and we have a great big jump start on that small business program that we're going to bring back to you next month. But at this point, your committee hasn't really approved a program for small business. You had for the community service agency organizations.
But we also have awarded money that wasn't on a program to 3 different entities. So you can go back and forth on this.
But again, I think our
agree.
focus needs to be on the community service agencies, because you did, ARPA all the way up through the food chain to full board did approve this community service agency program and did state and approve that it would be awarded on or about April 1st. Now, would these community service agencies come back to us and be all up in arms because they didn't get it by April 1st? Perhaps not. I think I'm looking at it from they put forth a good faith effort, and I want to put forth a good faith effort on the county board side that says we're going to follow through with what we committed to specific to those community service organizations.
So I guess my question, since I wasn't able to be at the meeting, what was the reason why, what was the discussion in regards to why this was tabled?
Sarah brought forward some information on who received PPP loans, and some of these organizations, perhaps all of them, I don't remember, received some, in other words, other COVID-related funding over the course of COVID. And so there was a question about whether we should have asked for additional information in the application. But again, this is in hindsight that we're going back and looking at this. I'm struggling to go back and change the rules on them midstream.
well, Wendy, I guess under the program eligibility, it's pretty clear in here what it says that some of the uses are supposed to be used for. And I remember in one of these that they wanted to buy a copy machine or pay for a copier. So that's, I think, what the question was at ARPA was the actual use and the need for some of these agencies. I understand they followed the guidelines, but I think the money was meant to go out and help people that were suffering due to COVID, and the replacement of copy machines and things like that, I don't know, are for qualifying uses. So I don't know. That's kind of why it got tabled at ARPA.
The replacement of the copy machine, as I recall, Rick, was though because the fundraising efforts of these entities significantly was hindered. So their day-to-day operational things like a copy machine couldn't be funded. That's kind of how it relates back to the ARPA situation.
And
Yep.
I guess
Paul.
my comment would be to that is if that one specific didn't meet your requirements, you could vote that one. Maybe no, but if the other ones met all your requirements and now we're changing, you can't, you can't throw them all, you can't throw the baby out with the bathwater.
There's an integrity issue here, I think, that you guys need to seriously consider. You made rules, you can't change them now. And you're also talking about a lot of these $50,000 out of a 6.6 million. Just pay them, change your rules and going forward.
I couldn't have said that better.
Ms. Bivens.
Well, one thing I've learned in 20 years as sheriff, I never was successfully sued because I listened to my attorneys. So I had 22 court actions against me over 20 years and none successful. I would recommend at this point in time, no matter what was done or wasn't done or what mistakes were made in this process, that we listen to our attorney. We deal with this.
Do I take that as a motion?
That's a motion.
And the motion would be that we pay these projects out of ARPA funds in the amount stated. Seconded by Forrester. Discussion.
I would, Mr. Chairman, I'd just like to comment. I appreciate what Paula just explained. I was saying the same thing to my seatmate here, Mr. Bivens, that, yeah, we're talking a minute amount of money to keep pace. I mean, they played the role. Let's move on.
I don't believe the ARPA committee meant to not play by the rules. It was just something we did. But I agree with Mr. Gibbs. But I'm on the ARPA committee. I'm not on finance. I'm sorry.
And we have earmarked for this money. We have a program, we have earmarked for it. And like I
Correct,
always
up
go
to
back
250,
my
right.
original, I don't want to contradict myself. We've awarded money to 3 different entities that were not in the program. That we said. When we set up the 5 priorities.
I think that's debatable, but that's not the point here. So any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 All those opposed? Motion carried. Okay. All right, we're to B of under new business, and that's revisions of the non-union starting wage. And we have a resolution before you. Wendy, do you have any comments on this?
Yep, the only thing I'm attempting to accomplish here is that there wasn't a resolution addressing the non-union starting wage that was dated back in 2019, I believe it is. And in the absence of another resolution, that one still stands. So I'm trying to overturn the 2019 starting wage and make it consistent with the wages that you just approved for non-union going forward. So you'll see the amounts there in the resolution that's been drafted.
Okay, is that clear? So I'd entertain a motion to send this resolution to executive for full county board approval. Moved by Bivens, seconded by Mimini. Discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Those opposed? Motion carried. Okay, then we have item C, grant opportunity multi-use path from Dixon to Sauk Valley Community College. And Wendy, I'll have you.
So this routed through to me from Bob, a conversation Bob had with the city officials, and I attended a meeting that was actually immediately following the ARPA committee meeting. Otherwise, I would have addressed this to the ARPA committee. But attended a meeting with the city, a little historical perspective. Our comprehensive plan through the Greenways Trail system encourages these what they refer to as multi-use. I refer to it as bike paths. There is as you know, through the ARPA process from federal dollars, there's a lot of grant money out there and available. So a recent opportunity came up with regard to grant money for a planning grant that would allow us to plan a multi-use bike path from Page Park out to Sauk. The reason this has come to the forefront right now, not only because there's additional grant money floating around, but also because it's my understanding the city of Sterling has a private donor that is working towards the multi-use path from Sterling out to Sauk. So this would be the last leg of that. And of course, obviously, once you could get even from Dixon to Sauk, you could go on into the bike trails, through Sterling and beyond, or come the other direction and get here on the old railroad bed that goes by the former or the current prison. So there was an interest by the city, and they wanted our participation. And in fact, because most of the miles of that proposed path would be in the county, not the city, they're asking for us to take the lead on a planning grant money that's available. The only cost to apply for the grant at this point in time is a benefit cost analysis. which is being done by an engineering firm or would be done by an engineering firm. The city of Dixon very much wants to see this move forward. It's been on their kind of their vision for some time as well. So they've stepped up and said, if Lee County is willing to split the cost with us of the benefit cost analysis, we will pay half of it. So the estimated cost of that is $10,000. They're looking for us to fund 5,000 of it, and the city said they would fund 5,000 of that. Again, this might have been something I would have addressed with ARPA, the timing just didn't meet. So in chatting with Bob about it, he asked me to report this to the various committees this week and actually get it on the agenda for your consideration, because like all grants, there is a deadline. So the deadline for this is April 14th or 15th. The work of compiling the data needed for the grant, the benefit cost analysis, for example, needs to be happening. And in fact, preliminary stuff is already being done simply because the engineering firm was concerned if they didn't at least do some preliminary things, they weren't going to get it done in time for the deadline. So I'm not telling you that by way of trying to threat or push you to do this. I'm just saying that you've got to consider the amount of time they need to put together that grant. That's why I've skipped over ARPA and per the conversation Bob and I had, bringing it to you. So with that, I would throw it out there. I see Bob in the back of the room. If you have anything to add to that, Bob, otherwise I will throw it out for questions.
So Bob, okay. So Paula, my thought was this come out of contingencies. We're depleting that contingency fund rapidly. Something for us to keep in mind.
Keep in mind, Jim, that again, under that standard allowance we're talking about with ARPA, this could be one of the discussion points or priorities was kind of that economic development arm. So potentially we could go back and look at this under ARPA. I'm not saying that the ARPA committee will approve it, but I'm saying that's an option as well. I just couldn't bring that option to you because I haven't had time to go to ARPA.
Well, it's just, that's something that the ARPA committee can, we can ask the ARPA committee to take a look at, but for our purposes right now,
right,
it's going to need to come out of contingencies. Bob, do you have a comment?
No, I think it's a viable project. I think timing is the issue, and that's why we are where we are. I'd still like to work with the city of Dixon on this and see what we can do with it. I know on Whiteside, I think they have a grant from an individual to do theirs. We don't have that luxury, so I think we need to go down this road and see what we can do.
Okay, so I'd entertain a motion that we approve this grant or to pursue the grant in the amount of $5,000 to do the cost benefit analysis, and I'd entertain that motion. Moved by Forrester, seconded by Bivens. Discussion. Rick.
Oh, in reading through this, excuse me, through this packet, I think that there's another question that needs to be answered is if we in fact put this grant in, there was a question that was asked if we want to write in a portion that we would co-sponsor or share the cost of it. So, I mean, while it's just 5,000 now, I mean, ultimately, there's a possibility or potential for this to be a little bit more money. So I think for full
Rick, I'm glad you brought
disclosure-
that up because that actually has to be addressed in the grant application. And I forgot to, I did drop the ball on that. He's absolutely right. The city of Dixon also proposes, it's not required, by the way, any construction grant could be potentially 100% funded. However, if you want to be competitive in the grant environment, the city of Dixon recommended that we also put forward a willingness to match some of those dollars. The amount is left completely up in the air. But yeah, that's something that the city of Dixon did propose, and we would need to state that going into the grant application, even for the planning process. So thanks, Rick, for reminding me of that.
Any other discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor of the motion to move forward with cost sharing of this grant application signify by saying aye.
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 Those opposed, motion carried. Yeah, lost Doug. All right, next is item D, purchasing policy revisions. Wendy?
Yep, so I will be very brief on this topic because it's an ordinance format, so it's going to lay over till next month anyway. So you've got a month to review and come up with some questions. Just a very quick high-level overview, and that is that Paula has worked almost since the day she arrived in Lee County on reviewing and modifying our purchasing policy to reflect actual practices here. She significantly shortened it. The original policy that we had in place, I believe, was something that was kind of patterned after Peoria County. We also worked with Dave Anderson to make sure that it would meet his needs with regard to, he's probably the one that puts out the most bids and would follow the purchasing policy more so than many departments. But again, I will leave it at that. All we're looking for at this point is a motion to lay over until next month.
Moved by Bivens, seconded by Mimini. Discussion. Hearing none. All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye. Aye. Motion carried. All right. So Paula, banking resolution.
This resolution is just adding Debbie Robertson in our office onto the approved signers list. So it'll be everybody in the treasurer's office, myself and my 3 deputies, Paul, Sam, and Debbie.
Okay. Motion to approve the resolution, go on to executive committee, full county board, moved by Bivens, seconded by Humphrey. All those discussion. This is housekeeping. Any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, motion carried. All right. We took care of F, G, memorandum of understanding with the city of Amboy. Wendy? Or is that-
Actually,
that
what we
Charlie?
were going to do on this is we were going to punt this to executive
Oh,
committee
that's right.
because,
That's right.
because
I'm
there's not
sorry.
really a financial impact for your committee to consider.
And I had that right here in my notes. I
It's been a
ignored
long
my
meeting.
notes. All right, so no G. No executive session. Other than that, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn. Moved by Bivens, seconded by Mimini. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, motion carried. Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.